The Pacific waters off Guadalupe Island looked deceptively serene that October morning, their stillness broken only by the soft churn of the Solmar V's propellers. But beneath that surface, the world belonged to sharks, particularly the great white. Every diver on board knew it. Even before a fin sliced the water or a shadow appeared, the presence of the predator could be felt in the silence. There was no doubt, a shark was near. Among the group was Ming Chan, a dive instructor known for his calm precision and deep respect for marine predators. He had faced great whites before, always from the cage, always within the safe boundaries of steel and training. But nothing in his career had prepared him for what was waiting today. As he geared up, his eyes scanned the ocean. He wasn't searching for movement. He was waiting for a presence to rise from below. Ming entered the water with practiced ease, descending into the metal cage suspended beside the boat. From inside, the sea felt vast and unreal, sunlight slicing through blue depths, particles drifting like snow. Bait lines hung in front of him, bloodied tuna heads bobbing gently, already releasing scent trails into the current. He knew what that meant. Somewhere below, a great white shark had already locked onto the source. Then, the shape emerged. From the distant gloom, a massive silhouette, material azeda, great white, over 13 feet long, muscles rippling beneath pale gray skin. It didn't glide like most sharks. It moved with purpose, closing distance in direct lines. It circled once, twice, each pass drawing nearer to the cage. The bait didn't distract it for long. Its focus had shifted. The shark had seen the cage and the man inside it. Suddenly, the animal lunged. The impact shook the cage as steel groaned under the weight of the collision. One bar buckled inward, and before anyone could react, the shark's head and shoulders forced their way through the gap. The predator was inside the cage. Its jaws snapped reflexively, teeth flashing past Ming's face as he pressed himself back into the tightest corner available. This wasn't just close, it was contact. Above the surface, panic erupted. Tourists screamed. Crew members sprinted to override the winch and unlock the top hatch. But below, it was chaos. The shark's massive body twisted, its gills ripping on the jagged steel. Blood clouded the water, not from Ming, but from the animal itself. And yet the shark thrashed harder, driven by pure survival instinct and blind fury at being trapped. Inside the cage, Ming remained unnervingly still. The shark's tail smashed against the frame, sending violent shudders through the structure. It was too large to fully enter the cage, but too entangled to escape. Its eye, black and wild, flicked back and forth as it began to force its body upward, ramming against the top of the enclosure. The hatch was open. With a final surge, the great white burst through the top, erupting into daylight in a violent explosion of blood and foam. On deck, cameras caught the moment in shocking clarity. Steel twisted open, the shark twisting mid-air, red spray trailing from its wounds. Its body arced once before crashing back into the sea and vanishing beneath the surface. Silence followed. Then, from the rippled water, Ming emerged. Mask still on, movements deliberate. No blood, no panic. Just the image of a man who had stared into the eye of a predator and hadn't flinched. He climbed the ladder without a word. Behind him, the ocean settled once more. But what had just happened would ripple far beyond that cage, because that morning, a shark didn't just breach steel, it breached certainty. The footage from that morning spread faster than any tide. Within a day, the image of a great white exploding from a shattered cage, blood streaming from its gills, was plastered across news outlets and social media. Viewers around the world watched as steel bars failed, and instinct tore through technology. But what stunned them most wasn't the violence, it was the fact that the shark got in at all. Experts immediately took notice. Marine biologists, engineers, and behavioral analysts slowed the footage frame by frame, trying to understand the shark's approach. They noted its acceleration toward the cage, the precise angle of impact, the full-body commitment to the strike. What should have been a curiosity-driven bump had turned into a full-blown penetration of a steel structure. The question changed from, how did it happen? To, why didn't it happen sooner? The shark, now nicknamed Scarback, due to the deep gill wounds visible in later footage, reappeared within 48 hours. A research drone picked up its distinctive profile, circling another cage setup just offshore. It didn't attack this time. Instead, it kept its distance, watchful, calm, deliberate. But it was back, and it was unmistakable. The same body mass, the same damaged gills, the same piercing gaze that had stared down a diver inside a failing cage. Dive companies went into crisis mode. Cages were hauled out and inspected. Engineers discovered that, while the bars met tensile strength standards, they hadn't been designed to absorb a high-velocity frontal charge from a 500-pound shark. The breach had proven that such an attack wasn't hypothetical, it was a reality. New guidelines were drafted. Future cages would be built with horizontal reinforcement and emergency egress systems, all thanks to a shark that had rewritten the rules in one strike. Tourists, too, began arriving with different expectations. Many no longer sought the passive thrill of a safe cage dive, they wanted to see Scarback. Crews warned them there was no guarantee. This shark came and went on its own terms. But that didn't stop the questions. Had it become more aggressive since the breach? Was it acting erratically? Would it strike again? Then the sightings began. Scarback was spotted near other vessels, always alone, always silent. It swam slower than most great whites, trailing long scars and often approaching the very same position where the cage had hung during the breach. One diver reported watching it hover in place for nearly a minute, staring directly at the steel structure from just beyond the bait lines. "It wasn't hungry," he said. "It was remembering." The shark's behavior disrupted dive schedules. Some crews refused to lower cages when Scarback appeared. Others treated the sighting like a celebrity moment, pointing and filming as the animal traced silent arcs below. Yet among professionals, unease was growing. This wasn't typical shark behavior. Scarback didn't approach for food. He came back to the scene of the breach again and again, like a ghost returning to a battlefield. Ming Chan, the man at the center of it all, declined every media request. He issued no public statements. But through private channels, he sent one message to the dive company: reinforce the cages, and respect that it let me live. The phrasing shook them. It let me live. Not, I survived. Not, I was lucky. Ming hadn't viewed the shark as an attacker but as a creature that could have finished him, and chose not to. The implication disturbed more than a few crew members. What if the breach wasn't an accident? What if the shark had done it on purpose and then, at the last moment, held back? New footage confirmed one more sighting. A group of divers at dusk watched Scarback rise slowly from the depths, close to the hull of a moored research vessel. It didn't lunge. It didn't circle. It simply ascended, locked eyes with a diver on the safety linean, vanished again into the blue. And that, more than the breach itself, is what haunted those who knew sharks best. Because a great white doesn't usually come back. It doesn't recognize places or people. But Scarback did. And every time he returned, to the reef, to the boats, to the cages, reminded them, this isn't your domain. Even after the waters calmed and the headlines faded, the image of the great white bursting from the cage refused to disappear. It played over and over in minds, not just for what it did, but for what it represented. A predator born of the deep had forced its way into a space humans believed was untouchable. And then, against all odds, it had left without taking a life. Scarback became more than a shark. It became a story whispered on docks, studied in classrooms, and replayed in late-night edits by marine analysts, trying to make sense of something that didn't belong on a checklist. Its face, its wounds, and the moment it emerged from the sea were burned into memory. Divers spoke of him in the same breath as legends, not a monster, but a reminder. Some believed the breach had been an accident. Others weren't so sure. The deliberate nature of the approach, the force of the strike, the uncanny ability to escape it all, painted a picture that didn't feel random. One researcher proposed that the shark may have been responding not to food, but to interference. Its hunting space invaded too frequently, too aggressively. We threw meat into its world, she said, and it came to reclaim the silence. Scarback's reappearances only deepened the mystery. In every confirmed sighting after the breach, the shark seemed to avoid aggression but never avoided the cages. It moved close, always inspecting, never attacking. It knew those bars now. It had passed through them once. And each time it swam by, it was as though it was measuring not steel, but memory. Divers began to act differently when Scarback appeared. Silence took hold. Laughs and chatter would vanish. People would stay still longer, make fewer movements. Even with reinforced cages and new safety measures, Something about Scarback's gaze seemed to pierce all of it. One crew member said it best. You didn't feel like you were watching a shark. You felt like you were being watched. Ming Chan never returned to the site. He was offered private charters, sponsorship deals, documentaries. He declined them all. Those who spoke to him said he carried no fear, but he carried weight. When asked what he saw in the shark's eye, he didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "It saw me. I don't know what it thought, but it made a decision." That single decision, the moment the shark turned upward instead of inward, choosing escape over domination, became the heartbeat of the story. And for many, it shifted how they saw great whites entirely. Not as mindless eating machines, but as forces unpredictable, instinctive, and capable of decisions that defy simple biology. Scarback's last confirmed sighting came 6 months after the breach. A vessel north of Guadalupe recorded a massive great white with identifiable gill scars trailing beneath the hull. It rose once, near the stern, and then slipped beneath the waves. Since then, no one has seen him, but his absence only sharpened the edges of the legend. Today, every diver who enters a shark cage does so with new knowledge, not just of physics or safety protocols, but of what it means to enter a space where control is illusion. You can study sharks for years. You can predict their behavior, measure their strength, design your cages thicker, but none of it matters if the shark decides to act outside the equation. The breach was not just an attack, it was a message. That message wasn't about fear, it was about respect, and it came wrapped in power, muscle, and a black eye that didn't blink. Scarback didn't just tear into a cage, he tore a hole in our belief that the sea can be tamed. And somewhere, perhaps in deeper waters far from any human vessel, that shark still swims not hunted, not provoked, just waiting. Because in the end, when you drop into the blue, you are not protected by metal or rules. You are only as safe as the shark is merciful.